Oh, hi! My name is Bone Quee, the sassy fishy queen. How are you doing today? Welcome back to another... What is this called? Welcome to Cold Blood and Cocktails Fairytale Edition. As you beautiful people know, any tip you may have, please cast it away because this is a channel of positive energy. Okay? Okay. I'm the gay Ursula, ya poor unfortunate holes. Cheers to that. Oh god, my lipstick. How am I gonna do this? So my little fishy princes and princesses, how you doing today? I hope wherever you're at in the world, you're having a marvelous day so far. I'm doing pretty good. I was feeling a tiny bit blue earlier, but now I'm a damn grape. No, but I am very excited for this. This is gonna be a very long one, so I hope you meal prepped because you're gonna need it. So I'm a little drinky today. Shit, I don't remember. Just kind of went in my cupboard and mixed stuff together. There is Chambordinate creme de coco, a little splash of half and half, some water, otherwise I'll be crawling out of here, and just a splash of salted caramel mocha syrup. So it's a lighter drink today. It's great though. It tastes like a chocolate covered raspberry. Anyways, our story today is very exciting, folks. It's certainly not as dark or violent as our other stories have been, and it's not at all true. This is the original version by Hans Christian Andersen. I think this was in like the 1800s, maybe early 1900s. And it's pretty dark and moist and actually kind of sad, but I guess still kind of happy. I know you're thinking, what? In The Little Mermaid? Did I fall asleep for that part? Was I Netflix and chilling? So buckle yourself in with fishing line, honey, because this is not the sweet and innocent tale that you watched on Disnatch. And I do have to warn you, this is an adult version with sexual references, violence, a tiny bit of gore, you know, all the things that just make a story better. Also, I'm kind of feeling my makeup look today. A lot of people asked how I did my exorcism makeup for the last video and I didn't film it, but this time I did kind of film it, but it'll be for a Patreon only video. I do kind of want to do lives when I do this, but honestly, this part is so freaking exhausting that I just like can't even talk when I do my makeup. Call me a drama queen, call me a fishy queen, whatever you want, it's true. Cheers to you. Thank you so much for being here. I love having you, and don't forget, if you want some good shit, turn on the notifications. A lot of people have said that they click the bell, but then when they go and check, it's not clicked. Thank you, YouTube. Just making our job so much better. Anyways, beautiful babes, where the fuck do we start? How about in the ocean, where the water is clear as a crystal ball and as blue as a college freshman's testes after No Nut November. And though pretty and smooth the ocean top seems, what lies below is just as dangerous as eating glass or eating that 2-week-old fuzzy Chinese that's in the back of your fridge. And deep, oh honey, she was deep. The water, I mean. No anchor rope could ever reach the sandy floor. In fact, skyscrapers would have to be stacked from the bottom and they still might not even reach the top. Deep down at the very bottom of this wet, wide world is where the sea folk live. Not the people that Cousin Vinny tied a rock to and threw off the pier, but like actual sea people. Cheers for you little seaman. I'm sure you're picturing like a bare-ass ocean floor of white sand, like what you see when you snorkel in the Caribbean or at a resort, but no, it's not like that down there. The ocean floor was the most divine, beautiful, colorful picture. It was like a paint-eating kindergartner threw up on it in the best way possible. There were the most spectacular, colorful flowers and trees down there, with leaves that flow gently in the water, making it look like there was a gentle breeze. Magical-looking fish swam in brightly colored groups that looked like birds in the sky. And then down a little shell and stone-laden path at the very bottom of a valley stood a magnificent royal palace. And not just any palace, this castle was the tits, man. Well, this humble abode belonged to the Sea King, who had very bougie and colorful taste. Imagine Austin Powers colors, but down under the sea. The walls were made of bright pink and red coral, picturesque blue-tinted windows, a roof made of mussels that opened and closed with the current, and luxurious round beds made of just the finest seaweed anybody could find. It's like a damn Sleep Number down there. And pearls just fucking everywhere except on a queen's crown. The king was as single as a Pringle now that he was a widower, and the only grown woman in the castle was his mother. And this lady was clever. She was cunning, she was stunning, she was proud. She was like, yeah, this castle's cool and I do get to cut to the front of the line at Starbucks, but look at the oysters on my tail, girl. Like, look at them things. Most ladies of high status got maybe like 5 or 6 oysters, but no, she was an exception. Miss Thing got 12, which was basically the equivalent of carrying a Birkin bag. This meant that she wasn't just hot shit, she was like super hot shit. Steaming hot, like any hotter, and her tail oysters would have to be dipped into butter. Get a girl. But this kind of hoity-toity status that she carried really didn't deter people. On the contrary, people really respected her. One might say blessed and highly favored, although if she gets caught in a fishing net, probably blessed and highly flavored. Fish and chips, yum. But it wasn't the oysters that people praised her for, it was actually how well she treated her granddaughters after their mother had died. And these 6 little ladies were quite lovely, but the loveliest and most beautiful out of them all was the youngest, whose name was, you guessed it, Myrtle. Just kidding, of course it was Ariel, like duh, that's why we're fucking here. Her skin was soft as silk, her eyes as blue as the water that she lived in, and her voice just straight out of the heavens. And just like her sister, she had a human torso that faded into a fishtail, like she was an actual fishy queen, or I should say a fishy princess. And you'd think that with a whole freaking sea to explore, these girls would always be on an adventure, but they really didn't stray too far from the castle. And if they weren't inside playing, they'd tend to their fabulous gardens just outside the castle. And these whimsical gardens were like something out of a Dr. Seuss book. They had flaming red trees, blue bushes, fruits that glittered with gold, all planted in sand as fine as powdered sugar, or dandruff if it's wintertime. And a mysterious blue hue fell on everything. You'd almost think that you were floating on land with the sky above, not thousands of feet below in the water. Well, each little princess had their own small little garden that they could plant whatever the fuck they liked. One of them planted flowers in the shape of a whale, another in a mermaid shape. But Ariel's garden was round, filled with red flowers. It looked just like a sunset. Ariel was actually a pretty good child. She was wistful, she was quiet, and she was positively obsessed with whatever was on land. And even though when shit would fall from the sky and her sisters would put that stuff in their gardens, she would never put any of that in her garden. The only thing that was allowed in there was this large marble statue of a young man. Her garden was very cleaned and tamed. It was basically the Brazilian wax version of a garden. Beside the statue, Ariel planted a beautiful rose-colored weeping willow that complemented the blue sand so nicely, like somebody call Martha Stewart or Home and Gardens. And her garden was pretty and shit, but let's be real, nothing gave Ariel bigger ladywood than to hear anything about the people on land. And not even just the people, anything above land she was fascinated with. Her grandmother would tell her all that she knew about the ships, the cities, the people, the animals, the bugs. Everything that was completely unknown to Ariel, all she could do was picture it in her mind. And what seemed the loveliest out of everything on land was the fact that the flowers up there had a fragrance. Well, smells are nice, girl, but get your Zyrtec ready because you're gonna be sneezing your little puka shell titty covers off. And she just thought it was the bee's knees that the trees were so green and so tall and so luscious, and the fish that you saw among their branches had the most beautiful tweets and songs. Bless them, they didn't know they weren't fish. Well, when you turn 15, said her grandmother, you'll be able to rise to the top, sit on the rocks in the moonlight, and see all of the beautiful city and the trees and everything that you'd like. Well, this year, Ariel's sister would finally be of age. How exciting! But sadly, with a whole year in between each of the girls, Ariel would have to wait another 5 years. So much waiting, so damn much gardening. But each sister promised to tell the other sisters exactly what they saw. After all, the grandmother really only knew the half of it. But nobody longed more than Ariel. She knew that every time a dark figure clouded the light above, it was probably a boat filled with these mysterious humans who were completely unaware that mer people existed down below them. Well, when the eldest sister finally arrived home, she had more things to say than she could possibly have imagined. The sand was warm, the moonlight was heavenly, and the city beyond the sandbar twinkled like a million stars in the sky. To hear the music, to hear chatter, the sound of carriages passing by, to hear bells, it was all so magical. And every word her sister would say, she would soak in and try to memorize so that when she went to bed at night, she could look up and try to picture in her mind exactly what was going on up there. The next year, her second sister had permission to rise to the top and swim wherever the fuck she wanted. Personally, I'd scope out the nudist colonies, but I suppose that's a bit young for them. The sister swam to the surface at sunset and came back saying it was the most beautiful spectacle she had ever witnessed. The sky above had a beautiful golden glow that she couldn't even muster the words to express. Clearly, she hasn't seen Beyonce at Coachella, cause woof. A year later, Ariel's third sister rose to the top, and since she was the ballsiest of them all, she swam into a little river that connected to the ocean. She saw brick mansions atop vibrant green hills, twinkly lights. She heard birds sing, felt the warmth of the sun burning her face, and smelled the fresh, salty air all around her. Now, she was a little bit of a naughty lady and swam up to a cove of naked swimmers, but they all saw her and ran the fuck away because they were scared. She even saw a very curious big dog that just barked at her, and she was like, well, fuck you too then, and swam home. The fourth sister, she wasn't very adventurous. She was kind of a bore, so she didn't have much to report back with. But the fifth sister, when she had her turn, her birthday was in the winter, so she saw shit that none of the other sisters had seen. By now, the sea was a very deep green color, and there was enormous icebergs floating on top of it. She even watched a big-ass ship crash into one of the icebergs and saw this lady named named Rose floating on a piece of wood that totally could have had 2 people on it. Eye roll. She swam back down home to tell her sisters, and each of them ate it up like a freaking McRib. But as each sister grew older and they were free to swim wherever they liked, they kind of became uninterested. Like, each sister would leave for a couple weeks or a month, but they'd always return home saying there's no place like the bottom of the ocean. Besides, all the humans were scared shitless of them. They'd try to serenade the sailors with their beautiful angelic voices, but the guys just were not having it. Like, they wanted tail, but not that kind of tail. But still, when a storm was brewing, the 5 sisters would swim to the top arm in arm and sing to the men whose boats were sloshing all along the water to try to tell them that the bottom of the ocean is actually quite lovely. They'd like it. Parking is cheap. There's always something to do on Main Street, and don't even get me started on the real estate. That is a very good retirement investment. But sadly, the sailors would never see the bottom of the ocean before drowning. But the 5 of them would rise to the top pretty frequently, leaving poor Ariel behind. Like, talk about dirty bitches. She'd watch them rise to the top arm in arm, feeling as though she wanted to cry from jealousy, but mer people can't cry, which just made the hurt even more pungent. But at long last, Ariel finally turned 15. The grandma was like, about damn time too. It's literally all you've been talking about for years. The grandma was like, come, I'll adorn you just like I did with all your sisters. So the old queen let 8 oysters fasten themselves to Ariel's tail to go flaunt around the city. But Ariel didn't like that. She was like, this shit hurts. But oh, said the grandma, you must put up with a great deal to keep up your appearances. I guess no matter what kind of creature you are, pain is beauty. Honey, try wearing 9-inch heels for 7 hours walking down the neighborhood of Dallas and then tell me about pain. Ariel would much rather have a beautiful wreath of red flowers, but the grandma's like, tough shit. And so Ariel starts floating to the top, just like a little bubble of root beer. And Ariel had so many emotions. The time had finally come after years and years of waiting, of dreaming. She felt like she was gonna positively shit herself from nerves, although I'm not sure how they procreated, let alone went to the bathroom, so I don't know how that could be. A magnificent sunset with clouds like rose petals and gold leaves. She saw the beautiful twinkling of stars much brighter than the little blurry dots below. The air felt so nice and crisp, and off in the distance she could see a huge ship with 3 masts just sailing along. There was no wind, so the crew looked like they were just lazily walking around their ship, just drinking, talking about their exes, scratching, doing all the things normal men do. But quickly night fell, and suddenly the ship was popping. They were pulling out disco balls and the boom boxes. Ariel's curiosity got the better of her, so she swam a little bit closer. She thought maybe just a little peeky poo inside, every window. It's not gonna hurt. And these windows were very clear, much unlike the blue ones that were under the sea. She could see absolutely everything, and I mean everything. Curious little kitty she was. But remember, this was like the 1800s, so people were dressed very fancy. Everyone there looked so damn good, but the most handsome out of anyone was this 20-something prince with smoldering eyes. Think like Zayn Malik in vintage garb. Go play with a vibrating shower head with that image, honey. However old he was, it was clearly this young man's birthday, which is why there was such a big celebration going on. The prince walked up the stairs from his room, and when he entered the deck, all the dancing men lit off 100 rockets, making it look like daytime. These fireworks made it so bright that you could see every detail of the ship, the rusty nails holding it together, every rope that swung from the tall masts. But most importantly, oh, how handsome this young prince was. This girl was smitten. He shook people's hands, he laughed, he smiled, and showed the most beautiful pearly whites Ariel had ever seen. Don't think orthodontia is a thing in the sea, but I'm not sure. Regardless, she was like, oh, swoon. For hours the party carried on, and for hours Ariel could not take her eyes off this young gent. Until eventually the candles were snuffed, the rockets stopped, and the party was over. Boo, hiss. Ariel wanted more, like, take your shirts off. This isn't Chippendales, girl. Calm yourself. Except now the sound of music was replaced by a loud rumble as the sails were being released. The waves were getting higher and higher, and suddenly the sky wasn't starry anymore. It was very cloudy. These men that she had been admiring were in for a terrible storm. The waves began rising above the ship like tall, menacing mountains. Surely they would topple the ship over. But the ship plunged deep into the valleys of water and rose to ride the height of another wave. To Ariel, this looked like a fabulous game, like Ride On Surfer Chick, but then again, she can breathe underwater, so it's probably not quite as fun for humans. Waves kept crashing, bumping the ship side to side, and finally it cracked in two, splitting it like a matchstick. It toppled on its side, and water burst into the ship as if it were made out of paper. Now Ariel saw that these guys are kind of in danger, but she herself had to watch out for all of the wood that was being tossed around by the sea. One second the sky was darker than a witch's soul, the next it was lit up like day from the lightning. And with each lightning strike, she could see the panicked faces of everyone just floating in the water. It was every man for himself, and Ariel made sure to keep an eye out for her prince. She finally saw his face just as he was sinking, and she was like, yay, he'll finally be with me. But then she was like, shit, people can't breathe underwater. But no, he was not gonna die. This was love at first sight, and she was not gonna let her manses go. So she dove below the water like Michael Phelps and swam in between the beams, forgetting that they might crush her. After all, love at first sight always lasts, just like on 90 Day Fiancé. She swam in the water for what seemed like forever until finally she spotted him. He had been exhausted from treading the water and was just feet below the surface when Ariel scooped his ass up. She held his head above the water and just let the waves take them wherever they wanted. She did this for several hours until daybreak, when there was nary a sign that the ship or any of the crew ever even existed. The prince was pretty much passed the fuck out, but the warmth of the sun was bringing color back to his cheeks. Ariel sweetly kissed his forehead and brushed his dark glossy hair off to the side. To her, he looked exactly like the handsome marble statue that was in her garden. So she kept kissing him, just hoping that he would wake up, and finally, off in the distance, she saw land. There were trees, there were forests, there was huge mountains topped with snow, but the shore was luscious white sand that she just wanted to feel. There were orange and lemon trees, huge as palm trees. And girl, pitch yourself a hammock, grab a pina colada, and call it a day. And then just a little ways off in the distance was like a church or a convent. So Ariel swam the prince to shore, stretched him out, and just as she was doing so, church bells began ringing and people started pouring out of the buildings. Ariel didn't want to be seen, so she swam her ass out back into the ocean to peer behind some rocks. What was going to become of the prince? Ariel watched a young girl come onto the beach and approach the prince, and Ariel was like, bitch, this is my man, you stay the fuck away from him. No, she didn't. She was like, I hope this girl is able to help revive him. And at long last, the prince finally opened his eyes, looked up at the girl, and smiled at her, not Ariel. He didn't even know that Ariel existed or had saved his life. This didn't piss Ariel off, but it sure made her sad. After all, she'd fallen in love with this young prince, and she'd risked her own life to save his. And now he was being whisked away by some young hussy who did nothing to save him other than bat her eyelashes. So she dove back into the water and swam home. And when her sisters asked what she saw, she kept her mouth completely shut. She didn't say a damn thing. Instead of telling the family what she saw for fear of being called out, she'd swim every day to that same spot that she dropped the prince off just to try to catch a glimpse of him. She watched the citrus trees bloom and the fruit fall. She watched the ice on top of the mountains melt and be bottled into Aquafina, but never did she see the prince. And she couldn't cry, but she was sadder than ever. And she was crushed. Even her garden grew overgrown. Gone was the color in it. Gone was her will to live. Until finally she couldn't keep her secret any longer, and she confided in one of her sisters, who promised to keep it a secret. So obviously by the next day, everyone knew about Ariel's secret, and it just so happened that one of her sister's friends knew who this prince was. Oh, how about that? This friend had seen the prince's ship multiple times and knew exactly where his castle was. Oh, how exciting. Ariel's fins were simply quivering with joy. So come on, girls, says her sister, get your shit together. Let's go find him. Why the fuck did you take so long to tell us? Over there all moping and shit, feeling sorry for yourself, girl? No. So they swam to the top of the water near the castle, and this beast was monstrous too. It was made out of bright gold and marble steps which led right down to the water where they were. And in between the magnificent pillars stood statues that looked almost exactly like the one in her garden. Could the prince actually be who her marble statue was? They could see velvet tapestries in the windows, just lux on lux on lux. I don't know where these people get this kind of money. I can't even find a sugar daddy. And now that Ariel knew the prince's address, she would go there pretty much every day, swim up the little channel up to the castle, just hoping to catch a little peep of his face. She would follow the ships that he would sail on back and forth, and even listen in on the conversations of the men speaking so highly of him, which honestly made her tail moister than an oyster. I'm not gonna say she was obsessed, but not creepy at all, folks. I guess it is kind of romantic. But every time she'd catch a glimpse of him, she'd remember how his unconscious chest laid upon her bosom, and how she had kissed him ever so gently, and with a longing thought, she wished she could do that again. But he knew nothing of this, and what's more, didn't even know she fucking existed. But it wasn't just him that she was obsessed with. Her obsession with humans overall just grew and grew until she realized that she wanted to be one. This world is just so much bigger than hers. There's so much to explore for forests, mountains, caverns, colors beyond anything she could see below the water, so much exploring, so many smells. And so she asked her grandma, do humans live forever if they don't drown? And the grandma was like, no, they actually live much shorter than we do, and our bodies dissolve into foam when we're dead, and their bodies decompose and go into the earth. Plus, she continued, mermaids have no soul, so once we're gone, we are gone forever. Once a human dies, their soul rises up into the air and they become immortal. What the fuck, says Ariel? Immortal? Like, I would gladly give my 300 years down here for an immortal soul, like shit. Well, the only way to get a soul, says the grandmother, is to find a human who loves you more than absolutely anything and will stay with you forever. And after you're married and live happily ever after, you will be granted a soul. But then the grandma's like, don't get your hopes up, Chickapoo. That tail that you have, we think it's beautiful down here, but up there, it is disgusting. You are literally a meal to them. Nobody would ever want you. You have no legs. Ariel didn't like this. In fact, she thought this was utter bullshit. But her grandma said, just put it out of your mind, honey. You have 300 years down here. Let's party. So they had a little ball. The castle sparkled with the great room's clear crystal ceiling shining like 1,000 white fires in the moonlight. Music was playing, but nobody sang quite as beautifully as Ariel. The crowd applauded her like she was fucking Cher at one of her 15 farewell tours, and Ariel's heart filled back with love. But that love was soon dampened by the thought of her prince all the way up there without her. So she crept away from the party and sat in her garden sulking. But then, like music to her ears, she hears a bugle sound and she knows it must be his ship up above her. She must swim to him, make him fall in love with her, and win an immortal soul. But how? She knew her tail was a nasty little piece of shit. But then she thought, the sorceress. So she swam her ass out of her garden, past the foaming whirlpools, past where there was no more colorful anything growing, to where the witch lived. She'd never been here, and she didn't find it especially pretty. It was very gray and murky, kind of like porta potty water. Beyond was the witch's house, surrounded by plants that looked as though they were bred with animals. Trees with snake-like arms, grass with little teeth on them. Some plants looked like serpents with multiple heads growing out of slimy sand. As she swam closer, the trees started moving their arms, grabbing anything they could and never letting go. Sounds like my ex. Ariel hesitated for a moment and was like, maybe 300 years really isn't that bad. Like, does mama really need a soul? But she thought of the prince and was like, fuck it, let's do it. She tied her hair back like Laura Croft and just zoomed through those trees straight up to the witch's house. And as she zoomed past the trees, she saw they had a hold of human skeletons and animal bones. Things that had either perished in the sea or sunken down. She whipped past the bodies of decaying land animals and finally made it to the marsh. And right in the center of the marsh stood the witch's house, surrounded by sea snakes. And that just gave Ariel the heebie-jeebies, but that wasn't even the grossest part. The witch's house seemed to be entirely made of the bones of shipwrecked human beings. And there on the porch sat the witch, who was letting a toad eat out of her mouth, kind of like how people let canaries eat out of their mouths, which sounds disgusting, but then I think of all the things I put in my mouth, and a toad is basically a sugar cube for me. Well, Ariel approaches this lady, and the witch is like, look, honey, I know exactly what you want. And Ariel was a little bit taken aback. She was like, excuse me, witch, please. And the witch was like, what you want is a stupid idea, but I get it. You want me to get rid of your tail, replace it with a pair of legs, and you are sure than frozen shit that you'll be able to make this prince somehow fall in love with you. And that way, my dear, you will have an immortal soul. And Ariel was like, yeah, actually, yes. The witch says, yeah, we can do that, but there is a catch. I'll make you a potion, you'll swim up to the surface, drink it, and you'll grow legs, but I won't be able to talk to you again for a whole year. But these legs, little sweetie, are literally runway ready. You'll be the most graceful of all the ladies in the land, the lightest dancer, and have a walk that'll give all the boys whiplash. And, my dear, this process isn't that simple either. You don't just pop out tiny legs and feet. The witch told Ariel that this will be the most excruciating pain she'll ever feel in her entire life, as if somebody took a sword and was slowly cutting off her lower half. Okay, witch, but like, have you done childbirth? And though Ariel's legs will move like a graceful angel, every step she takes will feel as though she's walking on razors. Ariel thought this over, like, nails in the feet or swim forever. I don't know which one you'd pick, but I'd be like, never mind, ho, I'm gonna go have lunch with Shamu, bye-bye. But Ariel said, yeah, fuck it, let's do this. And the witch said, are you certain? Because once you grow feet, you can never return to the water to visit your grandmother, your father, your sisters. And if you don't make the prince fall so madly in love with you that he forgets his mother and his father and gives his entire soul to you, then you will never have an immortal soul. And if he marries another, your heart will break and you'll dissolve into foam. Like, damn! man, this little fishy lady is whipped for this guy. Girl, don't do it, he's gonna cheat. But Ariel still said yes, and just like ass, legs aren't free. The witch told Ariel that she thinks she has the most beautiful voice she had ever heard. Like Mariah who? No girl, you are where it's at. And the witch knew full well that she would try to charm the prince with her voice. The best thing you possess, said the witch, must become my own so I can mix it with my potion and my blood. And Ariel says, but if you take my voice, like what the fuck am I left with? And the witch is like, eyes, lies, tits, and ass, girl. If it worked in Pretty Woman, it'll work for you. Surely with that figure and your graceful innocence, you can win him over no problem. So the witch pulls out a knife carved from a large fish bone and hands it to Ariel. She says, this, my dear, is for you to cut your own tongue out. My god, this is like some saw bullshit. Ariel looks at it in shock, but is like, so be it. After all, what is she really gonna need her tongue for? Oh, how the innocent don't know. The witch pulls up a little cauldron, pricks her left bosom, and lets a few drops of her black blood fall in. Ariel then steps up to the basin, holds the tip of her tongue with her finger, and begins cutting. Piercing pain shoots down her throat and all in her head, and suddenly she's in a cloud of her own blood. She throws her tongue in the cauldron, and it immediately starts hissing and sparking. And just as suddenly as the neon smoke began, everything stops and the potion is done. Now tongueless and in self-induced agony, Ariel grabs the bottle of potion from the witch and swims home. She approached the castle, which was now dim with slumber, and knew that she could never return. No more stories with her sisters and no more protection from her grandmother and her king father. She was heartbroken, but she knew this was the right move. So she swam to the top of the water, made her way to the beach outside of the prince's castle, uncorked her potion, and chugged that bitch like a lager. Instantly, it was as if somebody took a hacksaw to her torso. For a split second, she thought, what if this was a mistake? But it was much too late to turn back. Plus, she knew she loved this prince and she would do anything for him. She screamed and writhed in agony. It was as if she was being pulled apart at both ends by two moving horses. The pain went on for what seemed like an eternity until it just became too much and she passed out with her head on the sand. When she awoke, the sun was shining brightly in her eyes and she could feel the warmth of the ocean breeze all around her body. She could also feel a stabbing pain in her legs, but that was nothing because before her, standing there was the prince. Finally, she thought, fine-a-fucking-ly. I will cheers to that, you get your bay. But he was staring at her quite oddly and right below her waist too, so she looked down only to find that she was butt-ass naked. No wonder he was looking at her. So she took her long hair and wrapped it around her body. The prince is like, who the fuck are you? And she went to answer, but she couldn't speak. So, without a word, he led her up to his castle, and just like the witch said, every single step was like walking on barbed wire. The prince then led her to a room that I'm assuming looks like Lady Gaga's closet, filled with silk robes, beautiful garments, and costumes, which I find very odd. Like, the dude just met her and he's already like dressing her in the finest cloth. And she's a little bit young too. Like, isn't he the least bit weirded out? Although, this is a fairy tale, so it's not like we can really look that hard into it. Anyways, he dresses her in a beautiful gown fit for the princess that she is, but he doesn't know she's a princess. He then led her to a great room filled with slaves dressed in the most beautiful gowns just like hers. And upon entry, these slaves began singing harmoniously. One slave in particular, though, sang much prettier than the rest, and Ariel noticed that the prince clapped much louder for her and looked adoringly at her. This made Ariel sad and a little bit jealous because she saw the way he's looking at her and she's like, no, this is my man. Like, Ariel definitely gives off hardcore jealous girlfriend vibes. It's okay, I've been there. But I also suppose her life literally does depend on him falling in love with her, so there's that. Plus, Ariel knew how beautiful her own voice had once been, and this sassy little slave had nothing on her pipes. She thought, oh, if only the prince knew that I gave my voice away forever just to be with him, but how will he ever know? Well, then the slaves start dancing, and whose ass do you think moves best out of all of them? Of course, the Christina Aguilera wannabe, Miss Becky with the good hair. Oh, this bitch, thought Ariel, I can show her up. So she glides to the room, her arms floating like a ballerina, and she enchants the entire room with her graceful moves. Even though her dancing was agony to Ariel, each move spoke to the audience and they began to weep. And with her eyes, she told a story that captivated the prince's heart until he finally said, you are my little foundling. He liked her, like he really liked her, and Ariel was like, boom bitch, mic drop, got this shit in the bag. He liked her so much that he even gave her permission to sleep outside his bedroom door door on a velvet cushion. I'd be like, okay, I'm not a dog, but Ariel was as tickled as a Turkish titty. So time goes on and Ariel's still sleeping outside of his door, happy as a clam. She and the prince would go on all these magnificent land adventures during the day, climbing snow-capped mountains, riding horseback through the woods, the dew falling on the princess's shoulders. To her, this was everything that she dreamed about, like she was in heaven. She was finally exploring the world and doing it with the man that she loved. You go, girl. You had a dream and you fucking got it. Fortunately, the prince was a bit of a chatty Cathy, so even if Ariel had her voice still, it wouldn't have done her any fucking good anyways. When they'd return back to the castle at night when everyone was asleep, Ariel would go down to the water to soak her feet. That seemed to be the only thing that really helped ease the pain, and she even tried icy hot. Well, one night while she was soaking her feet, her sisters popped their little heads out of the water singing their songs. She beckoned for them to come over. They recognized that she had no voice. They put two and two together and were like, well, obviously this is the witch's doing. Everyone knew of the witch, and everyone knew that the witch was fair. She made sure that you always know every aspect of the spell, and the sisters were like, damn, that sucks. But each night when Ariel would soak her feet, they would meet her at the water so they could all visit. Well, Ariel couldn't visit, but she could listen. But Ariel had never been happier, and each day she found herself more and more smitten with the prince. And he loved her back, but only as one would love a small child. So in her mind, she was seeing wedding bells. In his mind, he was seeing a playmate. Marriage was so far out of his scope that NASA couldn't even touch it. But if he were to find someone else to marry, she would dissolve into foam. She would look at him longingly, screaming through her eyes, saying, don't you love me more than anyone else? And he'd pick up on her vibes and say, yes, I do love you because you remind me of a girl that I saw once and never again. He explained to Ariel that he was in a ship that capsized, his entire crew died, and when he woke up on the beach, he opened his eyes and there was this beautiful girl standing above him. The most beautiful girl who he's not seen since, but could only ever be his one true love. And Ariel reminded him of that girl and almost put the image of that girl out of his mind. I'm sorry, but I would have been like, you punk-ass pickle-headed prince, you're only with me because I remind you of somebody else. But get this, that young girl was part of some religious temple thing and really can't leave the walls, so he saw her that one time and can't see her again. So he's literally picking her because she is second best. Ladies, you deserve better. Well, this blonde little bimbo, thought Ariel, she's getting all the credit for saving his ass when I'm the one that risked my fins weaving through all the broken ship parts and swam you to shore. Like, what the hell? Ariel's like, I waited till safety came. I waited to make sure you were fine. I even made a sand pillow for your head. And now he's saying he loves this temple trick who he doesn't even know? She was sad and sighed, but once again, she couldn't cry. Everything wasn't awful though, like there was a little silver lining, because if this little lady was a temple girl, he wouldn't see her anymore. And so Ariel's like, if that's the case, I will give my whole life for this man. I'll take care of his every need, be by his side forever. Like, shit could really work out for the two of us. But her excitement died pretty quickly because soon word spread around the castle that the prince was arranged to be married. A neighboring king supposedly had the most beautiful princess that he just wanted the prince to meet, so they were building a whole ship to bring this prince over to get a lookie at this cookie. The prince asked Ariel if she wanted to go, and she just like looked at him. He probably got the signal, kind of. He was like, look, I have to go meet with this king. It's my job. I know they want me to marry this beautiful princess, but she's not the girl from the temple that kind of looks like you. You know, if I were forced to choose a bride, I would probably pick you. Ariel seemed to have liked hearing that because then they made out, with no tongue of course. And then after their little kiss session, he fell asleep on her chest. How precious. This dude gives off like serious skis ball vibes. Is anybody else picking up on that? So they board the ship and they're on the front bow kind of Jack and Rosing it, you know, oh, I'm really flying Jack. And the prince says to her, you're not scared of water, are you? And she thinks, honey, if you only knew that just a month ago I was half a sushi roll, you wouldn't be asking me this stupid question. And as if she doesn't know anything about anything, he starts telling her about the beautiful fish that are in the water, how the water eats ships up, and all of the beautiful coral that divers have seen. Once again, she thought, if you only knew. The voyage was very long, and Ariel's sisters were swimming beneath the ship, keeping up the entire time, so at night they could still do their little chats. The ship finally arrives to its destination, and they're greeted with trumpets and waving flags on either side of the road. It's like they won the fucking Powerball or something. And every day was a new festival, but the princess never showed up. Word kind of trickled through the grapevine that the princess was just off studying abroad. She'd be back shortly, but she was learning hymns, I don't know, in Switzerland or something. And Ariel was all but wetting her knickers just to see if this princess was as beautiful as everyone said. And you know she was secretly hoping that this girl had something wrong with her, like a third arm, or she was missing an ear or had no nipples or something. But no, she was gorgeous, literal perfection. In fact, Ariel had never seen anyone as was beautiful. She had blue eyes that just swept you off your feet, that were full of truth and purity and all that good shit. And the prince comes up behind Ariel and shouts, "It's you! You're the one that saved me at the beach!" This was the temple girl. Ariel's just like, mother of fuck. The prince runs to this girl, sweeps her off her feet, and hugs her tight like a long-lost teddy bear. And he looks at Ariel and says, "My fondest dreams have finally come true. You'll be happy for me because you're my most loyal servant." And I'm sure at this point, Ariel's just thinking of all the ways she can gouge this bitch's eyes out. But she plays nice and she kisses the prince's hand, but then she remembers, well, shit, if they get married, I am dead meat. Inevitably, the church bells soon rang and it was the wedding day. These people move fucking fast. And who do you think is holding the bride's train? Ariel. I'd have snagged that thing back halfway down the aisle and watched her trip on her Jimmy Choos. But not Ariel. Even though she knew she was about to die, she still wanted nothing but happiness for her prince. And if his happiness lies in another woman's heart, then that's the way it is. And she gave up everything for this young man, her family, her home, her status as the most beautiful princess, and now her life. The wedding came, the wedding went, and so now the whole wedding party boarded the ship that they came on, which was now covered in silks and beautiful plush sofas for people to sleep on. Night came, there was a big celebration, fireworks were lit off, cannons shot, music played, it was a total soiree. Ariel looked down into the water, remembering where she came from, and said, "You know what? This is my last night, I'ma fucking dance." And she had never danced so gracefully despite the sharp pain in her feet. And with each step, an even sharper pain was hitting her heart because it was all starting to sink in. How she had given her entire life away for this young man who was now smooching another. How she had suffered so much pain daily for him, yet he knew nothing about it. This was the last evening that she would breathe his air, and the last time that she could look at the stars with the prince before she was gone forever. She had no soul, and now she could never earn one. But all around Ariel, everyone was joyful. People were dancing well past midnight. The prince was smooching his princess off on the balcony, where just days earlier, he had been holding Ariel. When the party died, everyone went to sleep, but Ariel stayed up, looking out over the water, knowing that the first rays of sunshine would immediately announce her death. But right next to the ship, she kind of saw a little bit of a stirring in the water, and up out of the water popped her sisters, just smiling at her. Except now they looked a little bit different. No longer was their hair beautiful and blowing in the wind. Each one of the sisters were as bald as Mr. Clean, and they told Ariel that they had given their hair to the witch so that she wouldn't die tonight. "The witch has given us a knife," said the sisters, "and it's very sharp, and you must plunge it into the prince's heart before dawn. When the blood has left his body and his soul escapes, your legs will fuse together and you can return to us once again. It's kind of either you or him," they said. "You go kill him, come back with us, live out your 300 years, but like hurry the fuck up because the sky is already starting to turn red." Ariel's like, takes the knife, and the sisters swim away. She then walks over to the sofa where the princess's head was sleeping on the prince's chest ever so gracefully. She bent down and sweetly kissed the prince's forehead, who was whispering his bride's name in his sleep. So cute. It's like when my wiener dog runs in his sleep. Just precious. She slowly raises the knife that's shaking in her hand. Could she do this? Was her life really more important than his? She considered taking the bride's life. Maybe if she killed her instead, the witch would be satisfied and would let her and the prince live out their lives happily ever after. She lowered the knife down to the bride's throat, just centimeters above her skin, close enough to cause the metal to fog from her body heat. She held it there, her hands still quivering, but she couldn't do it. This was her prince's true happiness, and she could now see how ridiculous she had been. How could she cause her family so much anguish simply because she fancied a boy that she had met once? How could she have given up her 300 years of life, her beautiful voice, her loving sisters, father, and grandmother? For the first time in so long, Ariel felt clarity. So she flung the knife into the sea, the water surrounding it turning as red as blood. As the sun rose, she glanced one more time over at the young sleeping man that she had given her entire life for and threw herself over the edge of the balcony into the sea. She could feel her entire body dissolving into foam, the pain in her feet disappearing, and every emotion leaving her. She was finally back in the water where she knew she belonged. But suddenly she heard beautiful sounds that she knew no mortal could ever make or hear. Like a feather, she was lifting above the water, above the ship, above the prince and his sleeping princess, above the treetops and the morning clouds that hung low in the sky. "Where am I?" she asked in an echoing ethereal voice. "You are among the daughters of the air," something answered. "A mermaid cannot obtain an immortal soul unless a human loves them eternally. On the will of another lies your destiny. The daughters of the air, though they too have no immortal soul, they can obtain one by their good deeds." Ooh, sign me the fuck up. "We spread happiness among the whole world, flying from warm coast to cold coast, putting glimmer in the snow and adding fragrance to the flowers. For 300 years, we restore health to dying lands and dying people, helping to make the world a better place. And by doing all of the good in our power, we obtain a mortal soul and can live forever. You, young mermaid, said the voice, have done everything in your power to obtain a mortal soul, and have been raised to the spirit world because of your kindness. And now, by helping the world as a guardian for 300 years, you too will obtain a soul. She looked down to the ship and saw the prince and princess looking for her, and they turned to the foam and looked as if they knew that she had plunged herself into the water. She floated down, invisible to everyone, and kissed her prince and the princess on the forehead. She knew this was the last she would ever see them, but she was overcome with gratefulness for her new angelic friends. Ariel slowly rose back to the sky, lifted her eyes to the sun, and for the first time ever felt them filling with tears. She would finally have a soul. And there we go. That's the story. Not quite the happy ending that Disney portrayed, but in a way, I guess it's still kind of a happy ending. How about that? She got what she wanted after all. Well, except the prince, which I guess was the whole fucking point. He got his happiness, she got a soul. I guess everyone wins, except her family, because now she's like dead to them. But this was very interesting, wasn't it? And I just finished the last of my very watered down drink. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this style video. Do you mind a few of these like real Disney stories thrown in with our murderous stories? I don't know if y'all have ever read like the original Pinocchio, The Wizard of Oz, but they are very, very dark, and I would love to recreate them here. But yes, anyways, thank you so much for being here. I love having you, and I appreciate you from like the bottom of my little seashell heart. All right, so I have to go somehow wash this off. I'll probably be spreading dish soap all over my face. Oh my gosh, this wig is too tight. Yes, madam. Look at that. What the fuck? I love my job. Y'all know the little spiel. If you'd like to support me and my channel just a little bit more, please feel free to join us over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Poplux. There you get videos a day early. You get Patreon only content. Plus, best part, it is cheap, fun, and fancy just like me. And like always, please be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell down below so that you're notified anytime I upload a new video. Don't forget my newest collection of highlighters, including Black Ice, which does change from black to white, will be available again soon at thepoplux.com. Also, my latest album, Kiss of Fame, is available everywhere online that music is sold. Thank you so much to everyone who's supporting them. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at officialnady, and you can follow me online at thepoplux.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you again soon. Bye!